You told someone. You opened your mouth, let the weight out, handed someone the raw and bleeding truth of what was happening inside you. And they nodded. They said the right words. Then they picked up their phone. That moment, right there, that is the wound this video is about. Picture the Roman Forum at dusk. The marbles still warm from the afternoon sun. Senators moving in clusters, their white togas catching the last gold light, their voices low and careful. A young soldier stands at the edge of the crowd. He has just come back from the Germanic frontier. He has seen things. Lost men he called brothers. He tries to tell one senator, a man his father trusted, what happened out there, what it felt like to carry a dying friend across frozen mud in the dark. The senator listens for 11 seconds. Then someone calls his name across the forum. He turns. He walks away. Mid-sentence. Gone. The soldier stands there, alone, in the middle of 10,000 people. That silence, that particular kind of silence. You know exactly what it feels like, because you have been that soldier. Maybe it was not a battlefield. Maybe it was a kitchen table, or a phone call that went quiet too fast, or a message you sent that got a single word back. Maybe it was the face of someone you trusted, the way their eyes moved just slightly to the left, the way their body said what their mouth did not. They were not there. They were never really there. And in that moment, something shifted inside you. Not broke. Shifted. Like a bone that sets wrong after a fracture. Like the way you stopped, mid-sentence, and thought, why am I even saying this out loud? That thought. That exact thought. That is what this video is about. Strong men stop talking about their pain. Not because they are cold. Not because they are broken. Because they learned, the hard way, through real silence from real people they trusted, that speaking your struggle out loud rarely makes it smaller. It usually just hands your weakness to someone who does not know what to do with it. This video will show you why silence is not a wall you build around yourself. It is armor. It is strategy. It is the oldest, most proven weapon in the Stoic arsenal, forged long before anyone wrote it down. But before we go any further, I want you to do one thing. Right now, pause. Go to the comments below and write this. My silence is my strength. My pain is my fuel. Write it. Own it. Not for me. Every like on that comment is someone else who has felt what you felt in that forum, in that kitchen, in that silence. Let them remind you that you are not alone in choosing to stand alone. Now, let me show you what the Stoics actually understood about strength, about pain, and about the men who carry both without ever letting you see the weight. The trap. Why venting feels good but destroys you slowly. Here is the script for The Trap. Why venting feels good but destroys you slowly. Now here is where most people completely fall apart. Not at the hard moment. Not when the pain first hits. After. When the relief comes. When someone finally listens. When you feel, for a few minutes, like the weight has been lifted. That feeling. That is the trap. Picture a wartime command room. Somewhere in northern France, 1944. Maps pinned to every wall with thumbtacks driven so hard the plaster cracked. A single gas lamp throwing yellow light across the faces of exhausted men. The radio hissed static. Outside, the ground shook with artillery every 3 minutes. Regular as a clock, steady as death. There was a general. His name was not famous. He would not make the history books. But the men under his command survived the war at a rate that puzzled the strategists who came later. His rule was simple, brutal, unyielding. He did not talk about what was wrong. Not to his aides. Not to his senior officers. Not in the private back rooms where other commanders would pour 2 glasses of something strong and unload the weight of the impossible decisions they had made that week. When a junior officer once pushed him, late at night, asking how he was holding up under the pressure, the general looked at the map for a long moment. Then he said 7 words. A problem spoken is a problem spread. He turned back to the map. The conversation was over. Now here is the part nobody talks about. That junior officer went back to his bunk that night feeling unsatisfied, feeling like the general was cold, like he was damaged, like real connection required sharing pain. But the general understood something that most people spend their entire lives learning too late. Venting feels like relief. It is not. It is a release valve on a pressure system that you actually need. Seneca wrote it plainly. Recede in te ipsi. Pull back into yourself. He was not telling you to be lonely. He was telling you that the outside world cannot carry what is yours to carry. You put your pain in someone else's hands, and it does not disappear. It just lives somewhere you can no longer control it. That is the mechanism. Hear it clearly. When you vent, your brain registers the act of speaking as action. It logs it as effort, as progress. The pressure drops, and for a few hours, sometimes even a day or two, you feel lighter. You feel like something moved. Nothing moved. The problem is still there, unchanged, untouched, except now someone else has seen it. Someone else holds a version of your weakness in their memory, and you have used up the emotional pressure that could have driven you toward an actual solution. You burned the fuel, and you went nowhere. And this is where it gets dangerous. The relief itself is the addiction. Every time you vent and feel better, your brain writes the lesson. Talking about pain removes pain. So the next time pressure builds, what do you reach for first? Not action, not silence, not solitude where real thinking happens. You reach for a phone. You reach for a person. You reach for the feeling of being heard. And slowly, without you noticing, you stop solving. You start narrating. You become the man who talks about his problems more than he attacks them. And every person in your life, whether they say it or not, adjusts how they see you. Not dramatically, not cruelly, quietly, gradually. The way light fades at the end of a long day, so slowly you do not notice it is gone until you are standing in the dark. Epictetus understood this. He grew up enslaved. Every morning, he woke with his body owned by someone else. He could not vent to the crowd. He could not seek sympathy from the men above him. There was no one coming to validate his suffering. So he chose something else. He wrote, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." Plain, simple, devastating. What is in your power? Right now? In this specific moment? Work that. Only that. The pain, the unfairness, the sting of being unseen. That is not in your power. What you do with the next hour is. Most people stop here. Do not be most people. Here is the action. Specific. Tonight. The next time you feel the urge to vent, before you pick up that phone, before you send that message, before you open that conversation, sit down in silence for 10 minutes first. Write down 3 words. Just 3. One word that names what you are feeling. One word that names what caused it. One word that names one action you could take tomorrow that moves you one step forward. You do not have to share those words with anyone. That is the point. That page does not need to validate you. It does not get tired of you. It does not look away. And when those 10 minutes are over, look at that 3rd word. The action word. Do that thing tomorrow. First. Before everything else. Do it before you check your phone. Before you talk to anyone. Before you open the door to another conversation about how hard things are. Move first. Then speak, if you must. The general knew this. He won the war in his own mind before a single battle was over. His men did not know why they trusted him. They felt it. There is a gravity to a man who does not leak, who does not spread his fear across the room like smoke. You want people to feel that gravity when they stand near you. Start with 10 minutes and 3 words. But knowing this alone is not enough, because there is something even more dangerous than venting to the wrong person. It is believing that the right person exists, and what that belief slowly does to a man who keeps searching for them. The shift, what the Stoics knew about silence that psychology won't teach you. Pay close attention to this. It will save you years. There is a man standing in the agora of Athens at the hour when the sun is highest and the stone is hot enough to blister bare feet. His name is Zeno of Citium. He is not yet the man history will remember. He is still raw, still searching, still stinging from the shipwreck that took his cargo, his wealth, and the life he had planned. He lost everything on the water, all of it, gone in a single storm off the coast of Greece. And now he stands here, in this market that smells of fish oil and sun-warmed leather, watching a bookseller unroll a scroll of Socratic writings. He reads. He does not speak to anyone about the pain of what he lost. He does not find a corner of the agora and tell a stranger about the injustice of the sea. He does not send word back to Cyprus asking his old friends to grieve with him. He stands. He reads. And something inside him shifts. That shift, that is what we are here to talk about. Psychology will teach you to process your feelings. It will give you frameworks, stages, cycles of grief. It will hand you a language for your pain and say, now that you can name it, you can move through it. There is something useful in that. But the Stoics did something different. Something older. Something that psychology, in its eagerness to make you comfortable, tends to skip. They taught you to stop treating silence as a void that needs filling. Here is the part nobody talks about. When you feel pain, real pain, not the small irritations but the deep kind, the kind that sits behind your sternum and does not move, your mind does something automatic. It reaches. It reaches for a voice, a face, a phone screen, an ear. It reaches because it has learned, somewhere along the way, that speaking the pain out loud is the same as releasing it. But Zeno, standing in that marketplace, was not releasing anything by staying silent. He was doing something harder. He was letting the pain become something. He was letting it teach him. Seneca wrote this to his friend Lucilius in a letter that survived 2,000 years. He wrote, "Recede into ipsi. Retire into yourself." Simple, brutal, 3 words. The translation strips some of the weight, but not all of it. What Seneca meant was not meditation in the soft, comfortable sense. He did not mean sit quietly and breathe until you feel better. He meant go inside, alone, without an audience, and face what is there. The word he used, retire, is a military word. It means to pull back from the front line, strategically, not in defeat, but in calculation. Silence, to Seneca, was not surrender. It was a tactical retreat into the only territory you actually control. Now here is where most people completely fall apart. You have been taught, your whole life, that the inside of your head is the enemy, that the voice in there is the problem, that you need to talk to someone because you cannot trust yourself alone with your own thoughts. So you run from silence. You fill it. You find the nearest person who will listen and you pour yourself into them. And for a few minutes, maybe even a few hours, you feel lighter. You feel heard. But look at what happens the next morning. The weight is back. Every time. And now, there is something extra sitting on top of it. A small, quiet shame. A sense that you gave something away you needed to keep. You handed your heaviest thing to someone who did not have the tools to hold it. And now it is back in your hands, slightly worse, slightly softer at the edges, like bread left out in the rain. Picture the Ludus Magnus, the great gladiatorial training ground just outside the Colosseum in Rome. Stone walls 30 feet high. The sound of wooden practice, swords hitting shield boards at dawn, the crack of it echoing off the marble before the city wakes up. Sweat and blood and sawdust on the floor. The best fighters there, the ones who lasted, they were not the ones who talked the most about their wounds. Every man in that yard had wounds. Every man had a story. Every man had a grievance, a loss, an unfair hand dealt to them by the empire or the arena or the gods. The ones who survived longest were the ones who stopped narrating their pain to the room and started using it as fuel in private. They would go to that quiet corner of the yard before the others arrived, when the stone was still cold from the night, and they would be still, not empty. Still, there is a difference. Empty is passive, still is a choice. Epictetus understood this better than almost anyone. He was born a slave. He had no rights, no freedoms, no body that belonged to him. And yet he built something inside himself so solid that 2,000 years later his words are still sharp enough to cut. He said this, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the opinions about things." Now do not let the simplicity fool you. That line is a stone wall. What he is saying is that your pain is not coming from the event. It is coming from the story you are telling yourself about the event. And every time you speak that story out loud, to another person, looking for them to confirm it, you are not releasing the story. You are cementing it. You are building the prison one conversation at a time. Most people stop here. Do not be most people. Because here is what silence actually does when you choose it rather than run from it. It forces the story to finish. A story told to another person stretches. It grows a drama it does not need. It performs. But a story you sit with alone, in the quiet, with nowhere to go, burns itself down to the truth at the center. And the truth at the center is almost always smaller than the story you built around it. Smaller and manageable. The general who returned from the battlefield and stood alone in his tent, the scrolls of Marcus Aurelius open on the wooden field table, the oil lamp throwing shadows across the words. He was not retreating from his pain. He was reducing it to its actual size, so he could carry it, so it would not carry him. Tonight, here is your action. Take 3 minutes, not 10, just 3, and sit in a room with no screen, no voice, no sound. Feel where the silence is uncomfortable. That discomfort, the itch to reach for the phone, the pull toward a voice, that sensation itself, that is the thing to watch. Do not act on it. Just watch it. Then ask yourself this. What would I say if I told someone about this right now? What would I need from them? Then, before you say a single word to anyone, ask the harder question. Can I give that thing to myself first? The answer, most of the time, is yes. You just never stop long enough to find out. Zeno stood in that marketplace and read the words of a man who had been dead for generations. He did not need a friend that day. He needed a mirror. Silence was the mirror. And what he saw in it built an entire school of thought that men still live by, right now, in this century. Your silence is not emptiness. It is the room where you become who you need to be. But knowing how to sit in silence is only half of it, because there is a second force at work, one that runs deeper than habit, older than comfort, and it is the reason even the strongest men break. It is the story of what silence reveals when it runs long enough. And that is where the real work begins. Weapon 1. The inner citadel, building a mind no one can enter without permission. Pay close attention to this. It will save you years. Silence is the door, but a door means nothing without walls. And most men have never built the walls. Picture Rome at the height of its power. The forum is loud before the sun is fully up. Merchants are already shouting over each other, amphora stacked against columns, the smell of fish and garlic and horse sweat cutting through the morning air. A senator pushes through the crowd in his toga, 2 slaves behind him, a petition in his hand. He is already 3 conversations deep before he has eaten a single thing. Someone needs his opinion. Someone needs his decision. Someone needs a piece of him. By noon, there is nothing left to give. That was the trap, not the enemies outside the gate. The voices inside it. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He wrote in his private journal, words never meant for any other eyes, words scratched by lamplight after campaigns that broke lesser men. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Simple words. But hear what he is actually saying. He is not talking about discipline. He is not talking about endurance. He is talking about territory. Your mind is a territory, and you decide who gets to walk into it. Most men live with open gates. Every complaint someone drops on them, they carry it inside. Every opinion someone offers, they store it in the center of the room. Every piece of news, every argument, every whisper from a person who has never bled for them, gets a seat at the table. That is not strength. That is an occupied city. Now here is the part nobody talks about. There was a soldier in the 2nd century who served under Marcus Aurelius during the Marcomannic Wars. His name has been swallowed by time, but accounts of men like him fill the margins of Roman military records. He was known for one thing above everything else. He never complained. Not once. Not when his sandal straps cut into his heel until it bled. Not when the winter on the Danube front froze the water in the drinking pots before dawn. Not when the man sleeping next to him died in the night from fever. The other soldiers watched him. Some thought him cold. Some thought him damaged. What he was fortified. When another legionnaire finally asked him how he carried it, he said something that sounded almost too simple. He said, "I decide what enters. Everything else waits outside." He was not suppressing his pain. He was not pretending it did not exist. He was choosing what got access to the inside of him. There is a difference. A wall with a gate is not the same as a wall with no door. You still choose who knocks. You still choose who enters. Epictetus, a man who was born into slavery and had every reason to surrender the inside of himself to bitterness, said this. No man is free who is not master of himself. He said it standing in chains. Let that settle. He was not free in his body. He could not choose his labor. He could not choose his city. He could not choose the man who owned him. But the inside of his mind, that was locked from the other side. No one had the key, not even the man who held the deed to his body. That is the citadel he is describing. Not a building, not a philosophy, a choice. The choice to decide what gets to live inside you. And this is where it gets dangerous. Because the men who fail to build this, they do not fail loudly. They fail quietly, over years. Someone makes a comment about their work, and it lives in them for a week. A friend gives a small criticism, and it becomes a voice that plays on repeat at 2 in the morning. An old wound, something said in anger by someone who barely knew them, gets carried like a stone in the chest for a decade. They did not invite these things in. They just never built the walls to keep them out. Your mind is not a public space. It was never meant to be. Every person who walks through your day does not get to leave something behind inside you. That is not openness. That is disorder. Most people stop here. Do not be most people. Because building the citadel is not about becoming stone. It is not about feeling nothing. The strongest walls in Rome still had fires burning inside them. Warmth existed inside the walls. Joy existed inside the walls. That was the whole point of the walls. You are not building coldness. You are building selection. Tonight, here is what you do. Before you sleep, sit still for 5 minutes. Think of one thing that is living inside your mind right now that was put there by someone else. An opinion, a criticism, a comment, something someone said that you did not choose to keep, but kept anyway. Name it. See it clearly. Then ask yourself, did I choose to let this in? Does this person deserve space inside me? Is this serving the version of me I am trying to build? If the answer is no, set it outside the walls. You do not have to argue it away. You do not have to forgive it tonight. Just move it outside and close the gate. Do this once. Then do it again tomorrow. Then again. The wall does not go up in a night. Rome was not built that way either. But every stone is a choice. And every choice you make to close the gate on something that does not deserve entry, that is a stone in the wall. But knowing what to keep out is only one side of the weapon, because there is something even more dangerous than letting others into your mind. It is what you do with the things already inside it. The old wounds, the old voices, the ones that were there before anyone else ever had the chance to speak. And that is where the next weapon is forged. Weapon 2, the Crocodile Protocol. How apex predators process pain without leaking it. The old wounds. You heard that. Not the ones people gave you last week. Not the fresh cuts. The old ones. The ones that have been sitting inside you so long you stopped noticing them. You just built your life around the shape of them. Now here is where most people completely fall apart. It is 1944. A wartime command room somewhere in northern France. The maps on the wall are covered in red ink and black arrows. The radio crackles every few minutes with reports that make the stomach drop. Men are dying. Plans are failing. The weather is wrong. The numbers are wrong. Half the decisions made in the last 72 hours were wrong, and every man in that room knows it. General Omar Bradley stands at the head of the table. His jaw is set. His eyes move across the map slowly, like a man reading a letter he has already read 100 times. The junior officers around him are watching his face. Not the map, his face. Because in a room full of controlled chaos, the face of the man in command is the only weather report that matters. Outside that room, Bradley is human. He has doubts the size of buildings. He has fear. He has grief for the men already lost. That is not a question. Inside that room, none of it leaks. Not one drop. That is the Crocodile Protocol. Not the suppression of pain. Not the denial of it. The strategic containment of it. The crocodile does not thrash when it is wounded. It sinks below the surface. It is still. It processes. And when it is ready, it moves. Most men do the opposite. They thrash. They leak. They broadcast their damage to anyone who will watch. Not because they are weak in spirit, but because no one ever showed them the difference between processing pain and performing it. Here is the difference, and pay attention, because this line is razor thin. Processing pain means you go into it alone or with one trusted person, and you sit with it until it loses its grip on you. Performing pain means you spread it outward to feel less alone inside it. Processing builds you. Performing empties you and everyone around you. Seneca wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Simple translation. The friction is supposed to happen inside you. The polishing is not a public event. But here is the part nobody talks about. The crocodile does not process pain by ignoring it. The crocodile is fully aware of the wound. It knows exactly where it is. It monitors it. It just does not let the wound drive the behavior. That is the protocol. Awareness without announcement. Acknowledgement without performance. Think of the most controlled man you have ever been in a room with. Not cold, not distant, controlled. You could feel it. There was weight in the room when he spoke. Gravity. Why? Because nothing was leaking. Every word he said was chosen. Every expression was deliberate. He was in full possession of himself. And you felt it, even if you could not name it. That is what contained pain does to a man when he processes it correctly. It becomes density. It becomes quiet power. That man you just pictured, is that you? Right now? Honestly, leave that answer in the comments. Not to perform it, to face it. Because the gap between who you are and who you just pictured, that gap is exactly where this weapon is forged. Now pay attention. This is the real lesson. Bradley did not suppress his fear in that command room. He knew it was there. He had learned, somewhere along his years of command, to locate the feeling precisely, to acknowledge it without reacting to it, and to continue functioning with it present. The Stoics called this the space between stimulus and response. Epictetus built his entire life around it. He was a slave, owned, beaten. He had every reason to thrash, to scream, to collapse into his own suffering. Instead, he wrote and taught what might be the sharpest line in all of ancient philosophy. Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. That is not resignation. That is precision. It means, identify exactly what you can control inside this wound, and work only that. The rest, you set below the surface and let the water hold it while you move. If this is hitting something inside you right now, do one thing for me. Hit that subscribe button. Not for me. For the version of you that needs to hear this again on the day everything goes sideways. So here is the action. Tonight, and it has to be tonight, not tomorrow. Find the oldest wound, not the loudest one. The oldest one. The one that was there before the first person ever let you down. Sit with it for 10 minutes without a phone, without noise. Do not write about it yet. Just locate it in your body. Where does it live? Your chest? Your jaw? The base of your throat? Now ask yourself this, and be brutal. Have you been processing this wound, or performing it? Are you carrying it like a scar that made you harder, or are you still bleeding from it every time someone gets close enough to see it? That answer is not for anyone else. It is for you. When the 10 minutes end, write one sentence. 1. What this wound cost you. Not in pain. In behavior. How it changed the way you move through the world. Because only when you can name what it changed, can you decide whether that change is serving you or slowly emptying you. Knowing this is only the first half of the weapon, though, because processing pain privately is not enough if you still hand your power over the moment someone tests you face to face. And there is a specific kind of person who will test you, deliberately, and they are counting on you to leak. Weapon 3, the forge test, turning every problem into a private power source. Now here is where most people completely fall apart. They feel the heat, and they run from it. They find the wound, they sit with it, they name it, and then the very next morning, the moment life throws something new at them, they shatter again. Same pattern, different day, because they never learned to do anything with the heat except survive it. Surviving is not the same as using. Picture this. Sheffield, England, 1845. The iron forge is running day and night. Fire so hot it turns the air itself into something you can taste. Molten metal poured into molds while men with burned forearms and soot-packed lungs worked in shifts, sleeping in 4-hour windows on wooden benches beside the machines. There was a man named Thomas Hoole, a forge master, not famous, not recorded in any history book you would find in a school, but the workers who came after him told the story for decades. Thomas lost his son to a factory accident. A chain broke. His boy was 17. The foreman told Thomas to take 3 days. The other men expected him to collapse, to drink himself flat at the pub on Addercliff Road, to never come back. He took 1 day. He came back to the forge the next morning, and he stood in front of the fire for a long time. Not working, just standing. Then he picked up his hammer, walked to his station, and he made the finest batch of steel Sheffield had seen that month. Nobody understood it. One man finally asked him, weeks later, how he had done it. Thomas looked at him. Then he pointed at the fire. He said, "Everything soft goes in the same way. You either come out shaped, or you come out ash. That is the forged test. Not a philosophy, not a concept, a choice you make inside the heat." Most people, when something bad happens, do one of two things. They broadcast the pain. They bleed all over the people around them, looking for relief. Or they bury it so deep it turns into something toxic they cannot even name. Both of those are ways of wasting the heat. Thomas Hull did something different. He fed the fire back into his work. Seneca wrote this: "Listen carefully. Fire is the test of gold, adversity of strong men." Read that again slowly. Fire does not destroy gold. It burns away everything that is not gold. The impurities, the weak material, the parts that were never real to begin with, they burn. What is left is what was always true and strong underneath. Your problems work the same way. Every betrayal, every failure, every loss that you are carrying right now, it is not happening to you. It is happening for the gold inside you to become visible, but only if you let it burn correctly. Here is the part nobody talks about. Most men hold their problems at arm's length. They keep them far enough away to complain about, close enough to never stop bleeding from. They carry the wound like a flag, like proof of what was done to them. And every time they feel that proof, they expect something back from the world. Acknowledgement, apology, recognition. The world does not pay that debt. It never has. What is that problem sitting in your chest right now? Not the story you tell about it. The raw, unpolished thing underneath the story. Does it feel like something you own, or something that owns you? That question is the entrance to the forge. When the problem owns you, you become predictable, reactive. The moment something touches your wound, you expose it. You explain yourself. You justify. You defend. And in doing that, you hand over the only thing that was ever truly yours, your internal state. Epictetus said it plainly. Men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things. He was a slave, a man who literally owned nothing, not even his own body. And he understood something that kings with every comfort failed to grasp. No external event has the power to enter you without your permission. The disturbance is always an inside job. The problem is not the problem. Your relationship to the problem is the problem. If this is landing differently than you expected right now, do one thing for me. Hit subscribe, not as a favor, because this kind of conversation is one you are going to need again on the days that come without warning. Now here is how you actually run the forge test. Not as a metaphor, as a practice. When the problem arrives, and it will arrive, today, tomorrow, next week, do not immediately ask, "Why is this happening to me?" That question is a trap. It points outward. It goes looking for blame and finds only helplessness. Instead, ask three things in this exact order. First, what does this problem demand from me that I have never had to build before? Not what it takes, what it demands you grow. A man who loses a job is not just short of money. He is being pressed to build discipline, resourcefulness, identity that does not depend on a title. The problem is showing him the gap. That gap is the gold waiting to be forged. Second, what would I do with this pain if no one would ever know I had it? Not what would you say about it? What would you do with it? Thomas Hull fed his grief into the steel. Writers have poured theirs into pages. Soldiers have converted theirs into precision and protection. What is yours waiting to become? Third, and this one cuts deepest, is the version of me that solves this problem the same version that created it? Because sometimes the forge test is not just about surviving the heat. It is about recognizing that who you were before the problem is not who you need to be when you come out the other side. The forge test is not about pretending the pain is not real. It is not about performing strength for an audience. It is something far more private, far more serious. It is the decision to take what hurt you and convert it into something the world will eventually feel the weight of, without ever knowing where it came from. That is private power. That is the kind no one can take from you because no one even knows you built it. The men who change history do not broadcast what broke them. You feel the result of it in the steadiness of their hands, the clarity of their decisions, the silence they carry into rooms that other men fill with noise. Tonight, after the wound exercise from before, take the sentence you wrote, the one about what the wound cost you in behavior, and add one more line beneath it. Write this: what this has forced me to build is. Then finish that sentence honestly. Not hopefully, not aspirationally. Honestly, what has this actually already built in you, whether you meant it to or not? Because the forge has already been working. Most men just never stop to look at what it made. Look, name it. Own it as something you forged, not something that happened to you. Because the difference between a man who is destroyed by his problems and a man who is made by them is not talent. It is not luck. It is not even strength in the way most people picture strength: loud, aggressive, visible. It is the quiet, deliberate decision to walk back into the fire and pick up the hammer. Every single time. And to never tell anyone what it cost you to do it. But knowing how to forge yourself in private is only part of this. Because there is something even more dangerous waiting outside the forge. There are people in your life right now, some of them close to you, who are watching for the moment you crack. Not to help you, to confirm their suspicion that you are just like everyone else. What you do in that moment will define you more than any private discipline ever could. Weapon 4. Chosen counsels only. The one rule for deciding who earns the right to your wounds. Pay close attention to this. It will save you years of misplaced trust. There are people in your life right now who look like allies. They sit close to you. They know your name. Some of them have eaten at your table. And the moment you open your chest and show them what lives inside, something changes in their eyes. Not warmth, not understanding, something quieter, something that files away what you showed them and waits. You have felt this before. You know exactly what I am talking about. Picture the Agora in Athens on a Wednesday morning. The sun is already sharp by the second hour, cutting through the linen awnings over the fish stalls. The smell of brine and hot stone hangs in the air. Merchants are shouting prices at each other, arguing over the weight of amphorae filled with olive oil. A philosopher named Zeno is walking through the noise, sandals slapping cobblestone, heading toward the painted porch where his students wait. One of his students, a young man named Cleanthes, falls into step beside him. Cleanthes had spent the night in turmoil. A business deal gone wrong, a debt he could not cover, his reputation in the dockworker community crumbling. He was burning to talk about it, to release it, to anyone. Zeno looked at him once, studied the tension in his jaw, the way his hands kept opening and closing at his sides. Then Zeno said 7 words. Who are you about to say this to? Not what are you going to say? Not when are you going to say it? Who? Cleanthes stopped walking. Because when he turned the question over in his mind, the honest answer was, whoever was nearby. Whoever had ears. Whoever was willing to stand still long enough to receive the weight he needed to set down. And Zeno knew that. He had watched young men do it for decades. Spill their wounds into hands that were never built to hold them. Watch those hands drop what they were given, then spend years trying to collect the pieces off the ground. Here is the one rule, the only rule you need for this. Before you open your mouth about anything that truly costs you, ask yourself one question. Not, do I trust this person? Trust is too broad, too emotional, too easy to inflate in a moment of desperation. Ask this instead. Has this person carried weight like mine and survived it with their character still intact? That is the gate. That is the only gate. Not longevity, not loyalty in easy times, not warmth of personality, not even love. Because someone can love you deeply and still have no capacity to hold what you are carrying. They will flinch, not because they are bad people, because the weight requires a kind of experience they simply do not have yet. Epictetus said it plainly. Never tell people your troubles. Half of them don't care, and the other half are glad you have them. Read that again and let it land without softening it. He is not being cynical. He is being surgical. He is cutting away the fantasy that the room is full of qualified witnesses. Most rooms are not. Most rooms are full of people fighting their own private wars who do not have the bandwidth to carry yours alongside theirs. And some rooms, far fewer but far more dangerous, contain people who will store what you show them and use it later as evidence of your weakness. But here is the part nobody talks about. There is a third category, smaller than both of those. Rare, the way a good bladesmith is rare in a city of 1,000 swords. These are the men and women who have been inside the fire, who have carried something that would have broken most people and came out the other side still choosing discipline over bitterness. You can feel them when you are in the room with them. There is a kind of density to them, a stillness. They do not fill silence with noise. They do not perform composure. They simply have it. These people exist in your life. Maybe 2 of them, maybe 3, maybe, if you have lived with intention, 4 or 5. Those are the members of your council, not chosen by affection, not chosen by how long you have known them, chosen by evidence, by the proof of what they have survived and how they survived it. Seneca wrote in a letter to Lucilius, "Be careful about mixing with people who are sad and want to tell you all their troubles. They will infect your mood before they cure their own." What he is pointing at is simple. You do not just choose who you speak to. You choose who you allow to speak into your wounds. Because wounds are open, they absorb. What goes in while you are raw will shape how you heal, or whether you heal at all. Your counsel must be people whose words, when they land in your open wound, will strengthen the tissue rather than infect it. That is the standard, nothing less. Tonight, take a physical piece of paper, not your phone. Paper. Draw a circle in the center. Write your name in it. Then think of every person you have shared a real problem with in the last 6 months. Write their names outside the circle. Now, next to each name, answer this single question honestly. Has this person survived something comparable to what I brought them? And did they come through it with their character intact? Put a mark next to the names where the answer is yes. Those marks, that small cluster of names, that is your counsel. That is the only group that earns access to your wounds from this point forward. Everyone else still gets your strength, your presence, your care. They get the finished product. They do not get the forge, because the forge is private, and who you let inside the forge will determine, more than any single decision you ever make, what you eventually become. Now understand something. Building this counsel, naming them, holding that standard, that is the discipline of a man who has already decided he is not for everyone. And that decision will cost you. Some people will feel you pulling back. They will call it coldness. They will call it arrogance. Let them. The legionnaire does not explain why he sharpens his sword in private. He simply shows up to the battle with a sharper sword than the man who complained about being alone. You are building something that most people around you will never build. Because most people would rather feel temporarily less alone than actually get stronger. You are not most people. That is why you are still watching this. Weapon 5. The silence signal. Why men who talk less command rooms without trying. Pay close attention to this. It will save you years. There is a room you have walked into. You felt it the moment the door opened. One man sat at the far end of the table. He had not spoken yet. Maybe he had been there 10 minutes, maybe 2. But every other person in that room already knew, without being told, without a word, that he was the one who mattered. You have felt that. The gravity of a man who does not need the room to know he is there. Now ask yourself this. When was the last time you were that man? Not the loudest. Not the first to explain himself. Not the one filling silence because silence made you nervous. When were you the one the room leaned toward? Picture a wartime command room. Somewhere in northern France, winter of 1944. The walls are stone. Maps cover every surface, pinned with bloody thumbtacks, the edges curled from humidity and cigarette smoke. A single bulb hangs from the ceiling, swaying slightly from the pressure of artillery that never quite stops. 8 officers crowd the table. 6 of them are talking at once. They are listing problems, naming obstacles, projecting fears into the cold air like smoke from their mouths. The radio static underneath it all never stops. It is constant. It is suffocating. Then one man raises his hand. Once. Palm flat. Silence. Not because he outshrank them. 3 others in that room had more medals. Not because he shouted. He had not raised his voice in 4 days. Because every man in that room had learned, through hard repetition, that when General James Harrison put his hand up, what came next was worth more than everything that had been said before it. He had said almost nothing for 3 hours. He had listened. He had watched. He had let the noise exhaust itself. When he finally spoke, 12 words. 12. And the decision was made. That is the silence signal. And it is not a trick. It is not a manipulation tactic you rehearse in front of a mirror. It is the natural consequence of a man who has already done his work inside before he ever enters the room. Most men speak to think. They use words to process. They talk to feel less alone with their own uncertainty. That is human. But it is also the reason most men are never the ones the room leans toward. The man who has already wrestled with his doubt privately, who has already sat with his fear and let it burn out before he walked through the door, that man has nothing left to prove when he arrives. He already knows what he thinks. He is simply waiting to see if the room catches up. Epictetus said it plainly. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. Simple. Almost too simple to take seriously. But here is what that line actually means when you strip the comfort away. Every time you speak before you have listened, you are showing the room your work before it is finished. You are handing them a half-built weapon and asking them to trust it. And they will not. But here is the part nobody talks about. Silence is not passive. That is the lie that keeps most men from using it. They think staying quiet means doing nothing, waiting, being invisible. No, silence is where the real work happens. While others speak, you are reading the room. You are tracking who is afraid. You are watching whose eyes move to the door when a hard question gets asked. You are counting the contradictions in what is being said. You are learning everything the room is trying to hide. By the time you speak, you are not joining the conversation. You are ending it. Go back to that command room in France. While the 6 officers argued, Harrison was building a picture no single one of them could see alone, because they were too busy talking to see anything. His silence was not absence. It was collection. Every second he listened, he was pulling in more information, building a cleaner map than the ones pinned to the wall. 12 words. 12 words that carried the weight of 3 hours of invisible work. Now pay attention. This is the real lesson. The silence signal is not something you perform. It is something you earn. And you earn it the same way you earn everything else that matters. You earn it by doing the real thinking before you arrive. You earn it by choosing, deliberately, to hold your words back until they have actual weight. That means something specific for you. Seneca wrote, "Retire into yourself as much as you can." He did not mean disappear. He meant, do your most important work before you show it to anyone. The cave before the stage. The private hours before the public moment. The silence inside before the silence in the room. Most people have this backwards. They figure themselves out in public. They talk through their ideas out loud, to anyone who will listen, before the ideas are solid. They share the question before they have tried to answer it themselves. And then they wonder why nobody treats their words like something worth waiting for. Here is your action. Tonight, before you sleep, think about the last 3 conversations where you spoke too soon, where you filled silence that did not need to be filled, where you explained yourself when nobody had asked, where you shared a thought that was still half-cooked. Write those down. 3 moments. Be honest with yourself. Then write 1 sentence next to each. What would have happened if you had simply waited 3 more seconds before speaking? You will find, almost every time, that those 3 seconds would have changed everything. Either someone else would have spoken and given you more information, or the silence would have made your eventual words land harder, or you would have realized, in that pause, that you did not need to speak at all. 3 seconds. That is the gap between a man who reacts and a man who decides. The room you want to command is not waiting for you to be louder. It is waiting for you to be stiller. It is waiting for the version of you that has already fought the battle inside, that has already done the invisible work, that arrives not to perform but to deliver. That man does not fill silence. He uses it. And the room, without ever being told, will feel the difference. But knowing this alone is not enough. Because there is something even more dangerous working against you. Something that steals this power before you ever get to use it. The new you. The man whose depth they can feel but never reach. The wartime command room smelled of tobacco, damp wool, and fear. Maps covered every wall. Red lines marked positions where men had already died. A single gas lamp swung above the table, throwing shadows that moved like soldiers retreating. The radio crackled. Static, then silence, then more static. Every general in that room wanted to speak first, to sound decisive, to prove they belonged there. Most of them did. They filled the silence with theories, with plans, with words designed to signal confidence rather than carry it. But one man stood at the far end of the table and said nothing. He did not look at the other generals. He looked at the map. His finger traced a river. He breathed. He waited. The room, without knowing why, grew quieter around him. Not because anyone told them to, but because something in his stillness pulled the noise out of the air. When he finally spoke, every man in the room leaned forward. Not because his words were louder, because they had been earned. That is the man you have been building toward this entire conversation. Not the man who performs strength. The man who carries it so naturally that performance never enters his mind. Not the man who explains himself, defends himself, justifies himself at every turn. The man who lets his presence speak first and lets his words finish what his silence already started. This is where it becomes real. This is where the work turns into identity. Marcus Aurelius wrote this, alone, in a tent, by candlelight, while armies waited for his orders. Confine yourself to the present. For words, chew on them. He did not write that while he was comfortable. He wrote it while an empire threatened to fracture beneath his feet. He wrote it as a reminder to stop performing the future. Stop rehearsing what you will say. Stop managing how people see you. Stop dragging the wounds of last year into the conversation happening right now. Confine yourself to the present. Be here, fully, without the noise of your own need for approval running underneath every sentence you speak. That is the discipline, not silence for silence's sake. Silence because you are so locked into this moment, so present, that you have no room left for anything that does not belong here. But here is the part nobody talks about. When you stop explaining yourself, people feel it. When you stop rushing to fill every gap, people notice it. Not consciously. They cannot name what shifted. They will just feel that something about you is different, something heavier, something they cannot quite get to the bottom of. That feeling, that depth they sense but cannot measure, is not a technique. It is not a trick you perform on a Tuesday afternoon and put away by Wednesday. It is the result of 1,000 small choices. The choice not to answer the text immediately. The choice not to complain about the headache. The choice not to explain your decision when your decision was already correct. The choice to sit in discomfort and let it pass through you like weather, without becoming the weather yourself. Those 1,000 choices, stacked quietly, one on top of the other, build a man that rooms go still for. Epictetus said it plainly. He always did. Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life. He was a slave when he understood this, not a metaphor. A man who was owned, a man with chains on his body and a philosophy in his chest that no chain could reach. He was not asking you to be passive. He was telling you that the man who fights every wave drowns in them. The man who reads the water, who moves with the current and against it only when the moment demands, that man reaches the shore. Stop fighting to be seen. Stop dragging people toward your value. The man with real depth does not need to prove his depth. He stands at a certain distance, and people walk toward him, drawn by something they cannot name. Let them come. Now pay attention. This is the real lesson. This version of you, the one you are building, is not colder. He is not hollow. He is not a man who feels nothing and says nothing and connects with no one. He feels everything. He simply does not wear his feelings like a costume worn to get sympathy from strangers. He connects deeply, but on terms forged from respect, not desperation. He speaks when speech is worth something. He listens in a way most people have never been listened to, because most people are too busy preparing their next sentence to actually hear anything. He is the kind of man who makes another person feel, for the first time in years, genuinely heard. Not because he talks about himself less, but because he is actually present. That is the gift of this discipline. It does not just change how others see you. It changes what you are actually capable of giving. Think about the version of you 3 months from now, the one who has practiced this. Not perfectly, not every day, without failure, but consistently. That man does not walk into a room and immediately scan for approval. He does not check whether people noticed him. He is already doing the work that needed doing. That man does not explain his silence. He lets it breathe. That man does not tell people his problems to feel lighter. He carries his weight, works through it, and comes out the other side forged harder, quieter, heavier with understanding. And here is what no one will tell you directly. The people in his life will feel safer. Because a man who does not collapse under his own pressure is a man you can lean on without fear of breaking him. People are drawn to that. Children trust it instinctively. Partners feel it in their bones. Rooms shift around it. That is not dominance. That is foundation. You started this conversation with a question you may not have been able to name. Something like, why do I keep feeling like I give too much away? Why do I feel smaller after I speak? Why does sharing everything never seem to make me feel better for long? Now you have the answer. The strong man is not strong because he was never broken. He is strong because he chose, again and again, to carry his weight privately, to do the invisible work, to speak less and mean more, to let his silence become a room that people want to be inside. Your final action is not something you write tonight. It is something you live tomorrow. Walk into one conversation and remove one unnecessary word. Just one. One explanation you planned to give but did not. One complaint you felt forming but swallowed. One sentence that was about you when the moment was not about you. Do that once, then twice. Then let it become so natural that people feel the change without ever being able to say what changed. Because the man whose depth they can feel but never reach is not a destination. He is a daily decision. Make it. Subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And I will see you in the next one.